Thanks for tuning in, guys. You're listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Greg Driver. I'm joined by Rahul Jani and Leon Everett. Let's go! Welcome! The end is the beginning is the end of some comics that we've talked about at one time or another on this cast. Yes, it's Ace Comicals number 36, and in lieu of new stuff to talk about, we've actually been playing the catch-up game, all three of us. So it seems, because this is what happens sometimes, because you see this huge stack of comics, and you get this massive pang of guilt because you've just been buying them and not reading them. So it's time we did that, and that's exactly what I've been doing. And I think that's what you guys have been doing as well, a little bit.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, definitely.
In case you didn't already guess, I am joined by the usual suspects. That is Leon.
Yo.
And Ray.
Evening, lads.
So, how have we been, guys?
Not too bad. Not too bad. For people who, for listeners who are in the UK, you can probably aware of the weather taking a turn for the better. So it's opened up some interesting possibilities now. The idea of like the sort of lazy afternoon, window open, maybe some music playing, sat on your sofa or bed or whatever with some comics in front of you. It's a good time for that, but even more so, it kind of makes me want to like leave the house, dun dun dun, and like go to a park or something, or just go outside. But then I remember people are noisy and loud, and I retreat back into my castle to read my comic books.
Back gardens, as far as I get, usually.
No, my neighbours, no way.
But I mean, like, you're mentioning the weather. But this is like the most British thing ever, by the way. A podcast about comics and we're tying it to the weather. No, we had like huge thunderstorms this weekend, so I don't think that's really reading outside weather.
Not at night time, of course. I mean, yeah. Your mileage may vary, but I try to avoid outside reading in the night.
I suppose it depends where you live. I'm not sure. Was it overnight for everyone? I don't know, but yeah, I'm just trying to be awkward. And
the thing is, it would kind of be cool if you got struck by lightning while reading a comic book. You could get those powers
while reading The Flash.
I wouldn't have been reading him at the time, so I wouldn't have got those powers.
Yeah.
I've been reading comics about mental health issues, so I really don't want to be struck by lightning while reading about that. if you absorb the thing that you're holding in your hands, that wouldn't have worked for me at all.
So, I guess, yeah, I mean, that's what it's been for me, actually. Leon has basically described what I've been doing for the past week. Apart from, I went to see Deadpool 2. That was pretty cool. And we can talk a little bit about how much we hate other people at the cinema in a moment, because that's what we always seem to get onto. But yeah, I've been sitting, chilling, windows open, reading books, which is kind of what I do anyway, even when it's not good weather. So that's like par for the course for me. And I've been reading through some old horror comics that I didn't mention this actually, but when we went to Free Comic Book Day when I was in London, I went to a sort of secondhand comic shop in Notting Hill. Yeah, secondhand comic shop in Notting Hill, and it's a really cool little place. It's like, was it called the Comic Book Exchange or something like that?
I think so. There's like a comic book exchange and then a clothes exchange and book exchange, like all part of the same company next to each other.
Yeah, so there's like vintage clothing, vintage books, and vintage comics, all in sort of the same guy must run all three, or the same group of people run all three. And the comic shop is really cool. You go in there and it's like these like old bookshelves just like rammed full of secondhand trade paperbacks in really good condition as well, because comics people look after stuff. And then there's also all these old like sort of like single issues in long boxes for you to peruse and have a look through. And I went in there and I picked up a couple of collections. I picked up a collected edition and another sort of like I don't know whether I can't really call it a collection or like an anthology, but it's got like an anthology that's annotated because it's got like a little bit of like introduction or blurb before each comic in there, and it's all been put together by this one guy who is like, his thing is pre-code horror comics. So that's horror comics that came out before the comics code, but there's some post-code stuff in there as well, some stuff that came after the comics code, and some stuff that's some more recent stuff as well. But his thing is largely pre-code comic books, pre-code horror comics, and that's what this book is about. And it's about how it's basically about the industry and how horror comics sort of changed over the years, and the reasons the comic code were brought in, basically, like how these horror comics got more and more sort of violent and depraved for the times until they decided it was time to do something about it, even though by today's standards they seem fairly kind of tame, I guess, compared to some of the stuff that we see and read today sometimes, some of the stuff that they draw. But yeah, it's pretty cool to have a look back at that, and there's like some old 1940s, 1950s stuff in there, and it's just awesome to read through it and to get that little bit of background with it as well. So I'm really enjoying doing that, and that's been my sort of staple. And alongside that, there's been the regular comics that I've been reading for this show. So
I wanted to say before you move on to that, that comic book shop you just mentioned in Notting Hill, like, it's the comic book shop that your mum warned you about, you know, because like we talk about going to Gosh, which is like this, you know, this shiny, bright, indie, colourful place, and we talk about Orbital, which is you know, like grunge and underground and like rooted in, you know, like all the fans go there. This is like that grimy. It feels like a grimy, dirty second-hand shop. I'm not the hugest fan of it, but I'm glad that you found what you were looking for there.
Why did you say it's the one your mum warned you about? When I hear that, I think it's the one your mum warned you about, as in like, you know,
like the guy that your mum doesn't want you to be with. Like, yeah, you know, it's like the shop that your mum warned you about, you know.
Turns up outside your front door with a leather jacket and a motorbike on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Motorbike and a leather jacket. It's a Southside Serpent. That's what that shop is.
It is. Yeah.
Holding a boombox over his head, playing the X-Men 90s theme.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I just wanted to say I went full on Greg this weekend, with like cracking open a beer, having music playing in the background, reading comics on my couch, which I never do. Normally I need like a really sterile, clean area to do it, and I was like on the couch and surrounded by crisps and biscuits and rock music and stuff. It was great. I can see why you do it. I'm going to do this.
Oh, hell yeah, exactly. Yeah. Didn't you have guests this weekend? Were they just like, they were there and you're just like wallowing in Cheetos and beer?
Well, they went out for the good weather. Like the other day I went to Richmond Park with them. We had a really nice day out in the sun enjoying the weather, which was really fraught because we couldn't tell if it was going to be pissing it down, which it did overnight, and then it cleared up the next day. And we had made plans for the next day, but we'd anticipated it was going to be crap weather, so we cancelled our tickets to go, you know, to this day trip we were going to do. And then it turned out the weather was great, so we went to a local park instead and spent the day doing that. And then today they've gone off and done the original plan. So while they went out, I've been catching up on all these comics.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me that you were wallowing in Cheetos and beer while they were sort of like sat in the same room twiddling their thumbs.
I mean, you've seen my living room. I could have been sat on the couch while they're sitting on the kitchen table. So.
True.
But no.
Yeah. No, yeah. So there's the Deadpool film that I caught, which was really cool. I'm not going to say too much about it other than the fact that it was really cool and really comic booky. I did enjoy it despite the problems that people seem to have with it and have brought up, particularly... I don't know, can I talk about that bit without spoiling it too much? I don't think so. So I'm not going to, but there is a large issue with the film that a lot of people have brought up, and I mean, yeah, it's an issue, but despite that, I enjoyed it. The main reason I wanted to talk about this is because this is like porn for you guys, and you want to hear about the cinema experience. So, there was these two guys in the row in front of me. And one guy was in there with his wife, and there was another guy on his own with his buddy. the guy who was in there with his wife, it was just before the film started, because the other two guys kept talking. They were talking in hushed voices, like through the ads and through the trailers, which I don't mind so much. That's fine. But just before the film started, this guy took real issue with it, and he sort of like grabbed the guy by the side of his shirt or something and said, "Can you shut the fuck up?" or something like that. And the other guy took real offence to this, and he got really threatening, and he's like, "Touch me again and you'll end up with a fist rammed down your throat," and all this stuff. And long story short, a fight nearly erupted in the row in front of me. And the guy and his wife left, and they must have complained, because about 15 minutes later, one of the cinema staff came in and called the other guy out of the screen, and must have had a word with him. And then obviously nothing came of it, because he came back in and sat down. But yeah, so almost had some full on violence in the cinema there.
15 minutes is a slow first response time, man.
I know.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did it interrupt the start of the movie?
A little bit, but not to the point where it bothered me too much. Like it did interrupt the start of the movie a little bit, but it was sort of like, it wasn't so loud that it was disrupting the movie too much or whatever. They were quite, and when the staff came in and pulled the guy out, they were quite clever about it in the way they did it. So
that sounds like a win. Sounds like a good story.
Yeah, but it is still the fact that two guys nearly got into a fight in a cinema showing, because no one knows how to behave in the cinema.
But that's just Leicester, right? You wouldn't get that in a civilized city like London, would you?
Well, people take their shoes and socks off in London cinemas, so...
Yeah. Apparently, yeah. Do you want to explain that, Greg?
So yeah, a friend of ours went to the cinema, and he's telling us that he was sat next to a couple where they had their shoes off and their feet against the chair in front, and one of them was barefoot.
Both of them were barefoot, apparently, or he had his socks on.
Yeah,
he had his shoes off with his socks on.
Yeah,
and then even more egregiously, like which is hard to top, like having your shoes off at the cinema and like waving your feet around in front of people. But even more so than that was after the film had started. Apparently, the girl said to the guy, "Can you go and get us some popcorn?" And he protested very slightly, and then went off at the start of the movie to go and get some snacks for her.
Right at the very start of the film. So he was saying it was like, as the film sort of started, as you see that little bit where it's like the kind of like pre-title card where it shows you the certificate of the film and what's in like heavy violence and stuff like that.
Patrick Swiffer or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Terrible people.
Yeah. So yeah, cinema experiences. Didn't you guys go to the cinema recently?
What did we see? Saw Deadpool.
Yeah.
Which I liked. I don't know if I talked about it on the cast, but I liked it fine. Oh, yeah, and we saw Solo. I saw Solo. Leon saw Solo.
Yeah. We were the only people to see Solo, apparently.
Yeah, it was a really empty screening, considering...
Judging by the weekend box office as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Both of you. You two are the only two tickets that got sold.
Pretty much, it felt like.
Yeah, I was saying, actually, just before we started recording, that usually when a film like this sort of drops, like some sort of Star Wars tie-in or something like that, and with a character as popular as Han Solo as well, because let's face it, he's a lot of people's favourite Star Wars character, I was expecting some kind of like massive outpouring on social media about how good it is, and that I haven't seen a wink. Nothing.
I would question whether he's lots of people's favourite character.
Not even a murmur.
Fair enough.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have favourite characters in like, a lot of people have different favourite characters in Star Wars, but I know a fair few people who would hands down say they love Han Solo.
Yeah, I think that's
been
the general discourse since A New Hope or Star Wars in '77 came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody was clamouring for his backstory, were they?
No,
no one really cared. That was the point.
I cared enough to want to go see it.
Yeah.
But what they delivered isn't the kind of thing I was after, and what I wasn't after was fan service, which is what I got, I feel. And I feel like it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Which actually, just before we move on to anything else, I'll just mention briefly that you brought me onto the fact that they're bringing out a Lando comic. because in this new Han Solo film, we've got Donald Glover playing the part of Lando Calrissian. And Marvel, this week, in fact, Marvel's new sort of series, Lando Double or Nothing, starts, which is... Well, I'll read you the blurb from the previous website. Straight from the frames of the highly anticipated film Solo, a Star Wars story, swaggers a younger and somehow even cockier Lando Calrissian. Before his days in the Rebellion, before he ran Cloud City, even before he lost the Millennium Falcon, comes the tale of Lando's adventures and misadventures in search of love and money, leading right up to his appearance in Solo. So it's kind of like pre-Solo Lando. So Lando before, the pre before the pre. So this is like probably Lando's origin story in comic form, if you will. And the first cover looks really cool, actually. It's just a big sort of like face shot of Lando, kind of like a bust shot type thing, because he's got his shoulders and his chest in there as well. And then we've got like these cool kind of like Star Wars, typical early 80s, late 70s special effects type stuff going on in the background, and the Millennium Falcon sort of flying in a straight line in front of him. And one of the most striking things about it is the fact that it's Donald Glover's likeness. So this is like the Donald Glover comic, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah,
I'm interested in that. I mean, I think all the new run of Star Wars comics have used the likeness of the people in the movies as well. But it's cool. It's cool seeing his face on a comic book cover.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
but the thing, there's something I wanted to touch on with this, because, I mean, going back to Solo, it was supposed to be like they were talking about it was going to be a Western set in the Star Wars universe, and that's the spark of the idea that got me interested in the movie. And I don't think they fully dived into that concept. Like, I was hoping, maybe wrongly hoping or naively, falsely hoping, that what they would do with some of these side stories or some of these, non-main trilogy Star Wars films is use the setting and use the universe to, as a template, or as a blank canvas for other genres, or like to introduce new templates. And I was kind of hoping that Solo would be that, because what we normally get is, the conversation that comes around a movie, and if you want to hear those, or if you want to see those other types of stories in the same universe, people say, oh, you have to read the novel, or you have to watch the associated manga, or the other, you go read the comic book, and the comic book gets to have the thing that isn't just the balls out action template Hollywood, cookie cutter thing that we normally get. And I think that's a shame that comics always seem to be like the secondary medium. If you want the thing that isn't just the thing you have on screen, you have to resort to the comics to find it. Why shouldn't it be the other way? Why can't you have these things that people look like, the nerds in us look forward to finding in the comic, because it delivers us something different that we don't get on screen? Why can't they translate that to the screen? I mean, I guess I know the answer. I know it's about taking too many risks and whatever, but it's just a shame that that's not what we're getting, and I keep getting my hopes up for that.
That's what I was just going to say to you, actually, that people are braver in comics with the way stories are and things like that compared to how they are on film. People take bigger risks and are braver with the storylines in comics than they are in the films.
Yeah, I mean, recently, Glover recently said that he wants if and when I think they are going to do a Lando movie, he wants it to be Frasier in space, which sounds fantastic. I hope they actually deliver on that. And if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. Like, he has the pull these days. Like, he's so popular right now. He could make it happen. So I'm crossing my fingers for that.
Yeah.
I mean, because even like the other, to bring it back around to comic book movies, Marvel have been doing this cookie cutter thing for ages. Every Marvel film feels like every other Marvel film, with few exceptions. For example, like Thor was flirting with Shakespearean dramas, and Ant-Man and Thor 3 went further down this comedy route, which was quite fresh for the the Marvel action template. But then when are we going to get like the movie version of Tom King's The Vision? I want to see a Marvel movie done by like a Coen Brothers, or like a talky drama thriller. Doesn't have to rely on all this action and just the standard low medium level stakes. And then every time an Avengers film comes around, it's like Universal stakes or whatever. Like, just something grounded and small. Like, I think the closest we got to that was Iron Man 3 in some ways. But even that had a bombastic ending, and I don't know, I feel like that fizzled out even though it started in a way that I really liked. But,
I think that stuff is on TV now. That's the thing. And to varying degrees of success, they're using the TV format of like multiple episodes to explore these things.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I'd say it's quite suited to that. So I think Legion, the Fox show, works really well because they've basically given it to a TV auteur and pretty much let him run wild with the character. And I think that format fits it really well. It doesn't really outstay its welcome, and it gets to dive in deep on some particular topics, and it builds the characters. Whereas I think when it comes to these movies, the like we were saying earlier, the comics where they're taking more risks, and I think it's because the stakes are just lower for there, and the medium is accepted, kind of like books as well. The medium is accepted to be very liberal in its approaches, whereas like tentpole blockbuster like filmmaking is so focus tested and like film made by committee type thing that while it's annoying, it's I can see why the risk is so low, but that was a really bad pun accidentally. But I can see why why they don't take these big swings. And it's frustrating because things that do take big swings that are unrelated to sort of, say, these mediums and that have been received really well. So like take a like Mad Max Fury Road or Blade Runner 2049. There's a comic book adaptation film in those styles that could be done. But I mean, Blade Runner didn't make that much money. And Mad Max, while I believe it did good enough, it didn't, like it wasn't making $1 billion.
It did get a comic book adaptation type thing though. It got comic book origins and prequels for each of the main characters.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what we always get. I'm saying, why can't we have it the other way around? And to be fair, I do understand all the arguments that Leon's making. It's just I still want it.
Yeah.
You know.
These aren't arguments in support of it. These are the frustrating realities where I think that I think with the companies that we're talking about, the risk should be minimalized to them because they're making all the money. They dominate the box office. They dominate home video. They dominate merchandise. Like, if anyone can do it, like, I mean, they've proved time and time again that within the confines of these blockbusters, they can push it. As the examples you gave and things like, say, with Marvel Guardians, et cetera, et cetera. But I believe they can go further. They just need to stop making. Every movie doesn't need to be a $200+ million budget movie that's expected to make $1 billion. Like you can make some $50 million dollar movies and do some cool things. Like Disney, like they can do what they want, but they're taking the big swings because it's about maximizing the profit. But it's sad because I would love to see that Mr. Miracle as well. I mean, but at this point, I'd probably prefer it as a TV show because I just think it would get better treatment in there.
I mean, I got a couple more points to make because I know Greg wants to say something about the state of TV and comics linking together. But like something that just occurred to me while you were talking is the closest examples that I can think of just now that have matched this have come from the Fox studio. So like Deadpool was a very low budget, very different movie, which I don't think they even expected it to be as big as it was going to be. But I guess that sort of is a contradiction to what I'm asking for. And then also Logan, which did try to be something different. It tried to be something deeper and more adult. and, you know, transcend just the usual bombastic action set piece comic book movie as we know it, but it does still kind of get trapped by its action and violence. But I just wanted to bring those two up. I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
Yeah, I nothing to add to your points there, but what I basically from the back of this, as you rightly pointed out, that I wanted to get onto was the fact that for all of this supposed effort that these studios are putting in to try and bring things to a wider audience, doesn't seem to actually be filtering back into the comic world very well. Because although, I mean, we had a conversation about this during the week, I think, actually. But yeah, so this is, and I thought it'd be a good idea to bring it up on the cast about how, so for all these tickets they sell to the movies and things like that, it doesn't necessarily translate into comic sales, and that's quite a sad thing for the industry. It's like something that originally started out as a way to try and boost comic sales and to get more people interested has ended up becoming its own monster, separate from the comic side of things, and comics remain as comics are. And something that was supposed to make comics less intimidating, I guess, maybe to people that would want to probably pick up comics but wouldn't necessarily know where to start. Again, yeah, like I say, it's become its own beast, and people that are interested in the films aren't necessarily interested in the comics, and the same goes for the TV shows. And it's quite sad, actually, that it's ended up that way, because I would have liked to have seen film ticket stubs translate into comic sales, and to see more people getting into comics, and to see stuff like that. But then again, the other point that we got onto earlier in the week is the fact that comics is heavily gatekeepered, and you've got all these. You've got these. They call themselves fans, but let's be honest, okay? They're not nice people, and they're holding the gates shut, and you know, with their sort of like bigoted views and their views about how comics should be and things like that. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help but make it a hostile environment for people that might want to get into comics. People that don't necessarily feel represented by the comics that are on sale at the moment are going to, you know, are being kept out by these people that won't let things change. And these people that would have been brought on board by recent movies and things like that are finding that there's nowhere to go, and that there are certain people who are fans of comics who simply don't want them there, and that's bad, and I don't like it.
I wonder if that's a slightly different argument, because you're talking about gatekeeping and hostility. I don't know if, and not to dismiss how shitty that behavior is, because I'm 100% on the side of not being those people. Like, I don't stand for that myself. But talking about like conversion rates of movie tickets to comic books, I wonder how much onus is on, you know, the promoters of the movies, or, you know, the like Marvel, for example, to promoting their big cinematic movie, and then only really tying it back into the source material. So we have Infinity War, and I'm assuming, I should really have checked this beforehand, but I'm assuming that the sales for Infinity War went through the roof, you know, before the movie and after the movie came out. And you get this conversion directly to the old stuff, all the stuff that this was sourced from. But it doesn't, I get the feeling that it's not really translating into sales or into you know, creating fans of comics the way that we do, the way that we follow it on a month-to-month, week-to-week basis, and getting people into the actual act of being interested in comics, as opposed to just reading the novels that they were rooted from.
The point I was trying to make is that maybe more people would end up interested in comics if there wasn't such hostility under the surface, and if people weren't fighting to keep things archaic as they are in some cases, to keep things from changing, and to keep things from being more inclusive and more representative of the world at large. And it's just horrible, because these people think they're saving the comics industry. They're not. They're dragging it into the tar. I guess is the easiest way for me to put it.
I mean, I wonder if we have so much focus on that because we pay attention to that and we're very sensitive to this stuff right now. But like again, I wonder how much of a percentage of a factor that is for the the public at large. I think if anything, there's a little bit more to do with again promoting comics as its own thing, but then like more than just the behavior of the people who are into the industry, but making comics accessible. That's what I was trying to get to. So I think the accessibility of comics right now is actually really difficult. If you compare being able to read a comic to something like being able to read a book, we have so many outlets for reading books. We have libraries, we have online purchasing, we have Amazon Kindle. We have all these analog and digital ways of reading any book you want on any device you want. If you want to read a book on your phone, while it's not ideal, it's actually not that bad because you can repurpose the text to fit your phone. I think if comic books are a much harder medium to get into, you can go into the library and pick up a volume, but I guess a library may not have the full expanse of what you're looking for. You definitely can't find floppies easily. You can't be current in comic books on an easy way, unless you want to go into a shop or purchase them digitally. And if you want to purchase them digitally, you have to have like a good sized tablet. You have to have like an iPad style device, or I don't know, because it's not comfortable reading these kind of things on your computer screen. So I think accessibility is a really big thing. Yeah. And I know we have these like subscription services for Marvel and DC, but that's just the big two. Like to get into anything else I think that's quite hard. And I wonder if there's strides to be made in that sort of thing, like in having a Netflix for comics, or in having a way to read comics easier on the devices we currently have. Because I know we have stuff like Guided View on Comixology, but even that's not 100% ideal. And I feel like there's a lot of other barriers putting people off just because of accessibility to the medium.
Yeah, I can see that, but
and then toxic fanboys don't really help either.
Fanboys, yeah.
Yeah, because to sort of add to the points that you guys have brought up, I think it's a tangled web, isn't it? It's a structural tangled web because first off, let's say we're dealing with like Marvel. Like in promotion of these big record-breaking movies, like Infinity War is probably going to end up the second most successful movie of all time. Like, there should be a concerted effort to push the comics. They've had 19 films to do this now. Like, instead of just plundering the source and having some token boost of sales for what was out of print before and bringing it back, and it's like, tied into the movie. What they should be doing is finding some way to bridge that gap for first weekends and stuff. There's so many options of what they can do in terms of promotions that get people into comic book shops tied in with the movies.
Even giving out vouchers with ticket stubs.
Yeah, having comics at the theaters being given out, issue ones type thing, free comic books type thing, issue ones for a bunch of stories, offering discounts on Marvel Unlimited and whatever with your ticket stub, just things that fire it back. Things as well where in the run up to the movie, after the trailers and the movie starts, on some things you have, say for instance Disney or Pixar, they will have one of their shorts play before. And what you could do before is just have a short 90-second ad or whatever, just highlighting the work in the comics. It's something to raise the awareness of it.
Or motion comics or something, because, without making it look tacky, I guess, but to have a motion, the first few pages of a motion comic of a newly released issue that semi-ties into the film on screen, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be very cool. And I think there's so many different opportunities we have with this. I remember in the run-up to the Matrix Reloaded, you had the Animatrix, but the Animatrix wasn't just, here's a DVD of the Animatrix. What they did in front of another Warner Brothers movie, they put Final Flight of the Osiris. On MTV, they put 2 or 3 of the shorts on there. I think Channel 4 or Channel 5 in the UK, we had 1 or 2 of the shorts there, and they just seeded them. And what it did is that obviously it built hype for the movie, but then it was also like the first time I was seeing like anime on some of the channels, but like at prime time type thing. And I think there's opportunities for crossover like that. And then, like we were saying, the next part of that structure is accessibility to these comics, especially like digitally. Like having an app, say, that will play on your smart TV, that will do like the Comixology zoom in on panels thing. Like,
yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, like there's like so many opportunities to like increase exposure and like bring the focus back. Like people know the names of the authors of like books. When a movie comes out, we know that. I mean, this is a bad example because it's the first one coming to my head, but we know that Gillian Flynn wrote what's it called? Gone Girl. I mean, that's a bad example because she did the screenplay for the film as well. But like, we know that
any
she did
Stephen
that
King film.
Yeah, like the name is plastered on there.
Yeah. But
because the IP for all these things are owned by a big company, we get a cursory based on the stories by Chris Claremont and blah blah blah. Like there's less of a focus there. But the downside of that is if we did bring back that focus to these creators, it could create an interesting feedback loop, and we could get like with their higher profiles, there'd be more of a sort of respect is a bad word, but the worth or whatever the proposition of comics would be sort of raised. Like we'd be like, it's one of the most powerful companies on the planet in terms of entertainment controls this, and they could be using their evil powers for good by setting precedents and pushing things in ways that we've not seen before. They control all these platforms. It would be interesting to see them disrupt the system that way. And I think there's a lot of options they have to do so, and it's just not been a focus for them. But there could very much be a day in like 10 years, 15 years, or whatever, where we think of these. I mean, these movies are going to be coming out forever until the end of time. They may dip in popularity and then soar back in popularity, but they're going to be there for all time. But the actual comics might not be, and we might look at them in how we look at like Sherlock Holmes stories, which were written over a century ago, where the source material is like so far removed, and like, the fresh stuff, it just doesn't have that plane anymore. And that would be sad because it's the backbone, it's the lifeblood. And I think it's ridiculous to me that a company as powerful as someone like a Disney or even someone like a Warner Brothers are just not capitalizing. It's like, are they scared of money? Like, like there's a big opportunity to push the comics medium back up to respectability. I mean, we get there every now and again where like a graphic novel or something hits like the Times list or becomes a New York bestseller, and people start speaking about like comics for adults and and it's like, but it's never turned into a wave.
That turns my stomach slightly when they say comics for adults, as if you know, this is the public perception that we need to change. The fact that people still kind of see it as a children's hobby.
Yeah,
the worth of stories based on just how they look.
Yeah,
on the shelf.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I wanted to add to from what you said, Leon, is talking about creators. Isn't it crazy? Like, isn't it wild how everybody knows the name Stan Lee, but what stories has he written that are relevant to now? You know, and how that ties into making better use of like modern day techniques, using like better use of technology to the strengths of the medium. Like you mentioned, if you could connect your comiXology to your TV, and there was something new and modern and playing to the strengths of like current tech. I think they need to capitalize on that, like you said, and it's stupid to me that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and people go looking for Stan Lee in every Marvel film, but
to what end, right?
Stan Lee didn't create all of those characters. He's sort of almost subconsciously giving him credit for things that he didn't do.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's become sort of the elder statesman figurehead for comics culture, but I mean, there's a lot of issues with that we can dive into on another time.
That's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah, but it is indicative of how small we've made comics. And like back to finish off that tangled web and like the structure. You think about it, so we don't have these systems. So Marvel are not, they're the example. So like Marvel are not doing that thing. 2, they don't have the system in place. 3, somebody's jumped over all these hoops and is engaged with this geeky, nerdy hobby, gone to their comic book shop like a dirty, filthy geek, nerd, whatever, picked up their comics. Great, they love it. And then their opinions are just invalidated straight away. And that's the gatekeeping element. So it's one of those things where it's the content creators all the way down to like the audience. Like there's just so many barriers in place that are not working well to endear this and enliven and extend this this medium, and it's frustrating. And sad because there's no reason it would be like that. I mean, say for instance on the community end, you're always going to have like these douchebags or whatever, but I mean, we can drown them out. Like at the end of the day, they'll end up being more new readers, end up being people who weren't reading comics 20 years ago, getting into the medium, and they could drown them out. I mean, it's evident in going back to the movies. Like these things were based on this source material, but they are the main driver now of this thing. They're the most popular, most well-known, and most financially successful extensions of these core ideas. And like these movies are not made for nerds. Like they're the 4 quadrant, like they're made for everyone. And that's how they make so much money. So these people are already outnumbered. So I think that's an area where there's a better chance of success for drowning out those attitudes. And I mean, you're getting so many different creators and like creator-owned comics who are just doing their own thing anyway, which is different from the templates from before. And I think that will continue to grow, but the industry itself needs its most powerful players to do their part. I mean, they've milked it and done well from it, but they need to like do their part and feed this stuff back.
They do.
What they need to do is put more comic book characters in Fortnite. That'll solve the problem.
Please don't. That, I guess, brings me on to the first thing on my list of comics I've read. So, into the comics we go. Which, this comes off the whole TV thing, because we have a comic book here called Legion, which we have reviewed previously on this show and talked about. And this is like a 5-part run dealing with the character Legion, or David Harler, as he's also known. The popular TV, well, obviously you may know from the popular TV series that Leon has mentioned, but as is also an established X-Men character and is the son of Charles Xavier. Now, it was a 5-part run, and we've reached part 5, so we're now at the end. And I like this. I thought it was pretty good. is a great conclusion to what I saw as an interesting modern view, a modern take on mental illness. Because as I mentioned on the previous cast when we talked about Legion, comics aren't always good at that, and media hasn't always been good at displaying mental illness in a sensitive way, or in a way that it doesn't, I guess the stereotype in media is when you see someone who's mentally ill, it's like, oh, check him out, he's crazy, he's this, like, how do I explain it?
It's like an easy crutch in lieu
like
of
an easy
character development.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always it's always handled really badly, and it's never addressed or explored that well. So this does a good job of seeing things through a better lens, I guess, and it does good work in the way that it brings the mental illness that David suffers to the forefront, and also in the way that it explains that and gets that across to the reader in the way that it translates it into comic form. I think it does that quite well. So the way that it actually does this is, without going into the story too much, because I want you guys to read it when it's collected. I want people who listen to this to read this because I like this story. David's head is the inside of David's head is a world, and the citizens of that world are his alters, or his alternate personalities. And when it's viewed through that lens, it makes it a little bit easier to understand, and it kind of makes it a little clearer, and it also helps to translate it into comic form, because it gives it a form and a platform. It gives a body to something that's notoriously ethereal, if you understand what I'm getting at. And it just makes it digestible and less confusing to display it that way, but it's also a really interesting way to do it, and an interesting way to kind of raise awareness of mental illness and explain it to people that may not have ever experienced it, or that may have experienced, as I say, these the way media has done mental illness previously. And these citizens each kind of have their own sort of place. Like, some of them have their own place in his head, and they reside within a mood or like a feeling or something within his head is where this alter lives, and this alter is born of that feeling or that mood or that particular event or that particular pain or whatever else, however else you want to explain it. And it's quite cool how it does that. And so we've got basically a psychologist wandering around inside David's head, attempting to remedy him of what they refer to as Lord Trauma, who is the sort of this powerful dominant alter who wants to kind of have full control of David for himself, and he's just hell-bent on causing pain and trauma, basically, which is in the name, and he is born of David's trauma. It's quite inventive on how it's tackled, and things are portrayed within Legion's head. The way they do that is quite inventive as well, as in so not just what I've already talked about with the world and everything else, but the way that this world is put together and portrayed, and the way we see different creatures that live in there, and different the different flora and fauna, basically, and what that's made up of and how that works. And yeah, as I've talked about previously, I love the minimalist art style, and the fact that it's never overcrowded or cluttered. Like, it's just enough detail to get across what it needs to get across, and there's never too much in one panel to the point where it's difficult to see what's going on, which with a story like this, with telling a tale like this, you can't overclutter it. You have to be I guess you have to be minimalist, otherwise you confuse people, because it's quite a confusing thing from the outset in the way that it's done, and the way these alternate personalities manifest themselves in the physical world as well, when we get to see that, because David's not just mentally ill, he's a mentally ill super powerful mutant that has kind of reality altering abilities, and his other personalities are able to use those abilities and take advantage of that. And it's some of the character designs in it as well, and the creature designs are great, and it's just a complete delight to read. I've just loved it start to finish, and it's 5 issues long, so it's not mega long, and it's an accessible story and accessible commentary on mental illness that I urge you all to read, because I think it's great, and I think what it does is cool, and I think a lot more people should read it, and it will be collected soon. So that's one for your bookshelf, and that is Legion, the 2018 run. And that is we have a writer, Peter Milligan, art by Wilfredo Torres, and the cover of number 5 is by Javier Rodriguez. And on the cover of number 5, we've got Dr. Hannah Jones, the psychologist in the story, kneeling over this kind of broken, almost like a clay doll thrown at the floor of David Harler. And it's a pretty cool cover. I quite like it. And yeah, it's a really cool book, so I recommend that one. And yeah, 5 parts, you can't argue with that. So that's Legion. And
yeah, I'm definitely gonna look to pick that up when it's collected.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, it's great. Ray, did you have something to move on to from there?
Yeah, following on from that. So I read a book today called The Nao of Brown. It's something I've had on my shelf for a very long time. Friend of mine, friend of the show, Y Snail on Twitter, bought me this for my birthday quite a few years ago, saying that she loved it and she thought I should read it, and I've done her a disservice by not getting to it until now. But she has impeccable taste. I love this book. It's called, like I said, it's The Nao of Brown. That's the Nao of Brown, by Glyn Dillon. He's the author and illustrator of this book, this big tome, lovely hardback. And it's about a woman called Nao Brown, and she's a half Japanese, half English illustrator who suffers from OCD, but not OCD in the Hollywood way that we know it. She suffers from violent, morbid obsessions. And it's about this woman trying to deal with these intrusive thoughts, and how she goes about her daily life and trying to find love, and just trying to survive with this affliction that she has. So it's a book about anxiety and OCD in the form of these violent intrusive thoughts. It's a book about believing the worst in yourself, either through compulsion or habit, or just the false comfort of constantly beating yourself down. And it's about how there's more to you than just the mind that you experience the world through. So it's all set through from her perspective, and it starts off with her visiting a Buddhist temple. So a lot of these scenes are set in this Buddhist temple that she goes to, and where she attempts to meditate as a form of trying to bypass these thoughts and to keep it in check, because she's constantly afraid of her own, as of yet, or as far as we can see, not manifested physically intrusive thoughts. So she hasn't, as far as we know, hasn't actually harmed anyone, hasn't actually harmed herself, but she comes very close to it at all the times, and she has these deep senses of disgust in herself. So she's trying to find ways to work her way through it. And I don't know, it's super interesting. It's really heartfelt. And it's a lot about, there's so many themes going on. It's about mindfulness and allowing yourself to be free from your own thoughts. And it's about cycles. Like the front cover is her, like her body, but her head is a washing machine, which is important to the book because in trying to find love, she encounters this washing machine repairman who, she forms an attachment with and has a bit of a crush on, and then, takes certain actions to try and get to know him better. So we see her, like, we see cycles in loads of forms in this book. So there's, her cycles of her behavior, the fact that she's constantly riding her bicycle. We see her, the washing machine cycles that are constantly brought up. We see her painting circles to meditate upon, which is part of the a thing that she's taught at this Buddhist temple. And we see these cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. And it's just, there's so much going on. Like, I almost feel like I can't really talk about it because you need to experience it for yourself. In some ways, I think it's almost like it's one of the things that I touched on was it's a subversion of the manic pixie dream girl archetype, because she's this this gorgeous, creative person who works in a vinyl toy store. So she has all these qualities that tend to appeal to a particular type of guy, and she has these kinds of friends, but she's oblivious to their feelings towards her because she's stuck in her own head all the time. And also, she's not the person that they want her to be or that they think she is. And it's a lot about how you can have very different opinions of both yourself and other people that can be somewhat rooted in reality, but also very deeply rooted in your own perspective on, your own issues, on what you're projecting onto other people. And this comic gets that across really well. It's not about not being the person other people see you as, while also not being who you convince yourself that you are. And also about not taking seriously or not being able to register the pain of others because you're so focused on your own pain, which is, sometimes that's just how it is, and that's a good thing. You need to learn to work through your own issues before you can help anybody else. It's a book about meditation and focus. And I like that it's a book about these themes, about meditation, because the artwork provides you with these really beautifully detailed panels to focus on. So we have the main story of Nao, working her way through London. Actually, I didn't mention it's, she lives in London, and it starts off with her on her return journey back from Japan because she's half Japanese, half English. And everything in her perspective is painted in watercolors and pencils in this really expressive, really very delicate way, which really gets her vulnerability across. And then it's intercut with these stories, in-universe stories that she's a fan of, called Ichi, which is an in-universe manga, which has a very different art style to the main story. It has a very fantasy-esque woodprint style full-page scenes, which are really exquisitely detailed and have this very, I don't know what to relate it to, but organic forest or ivy style borders along the edge, which you can kind of find yourself getting lost in if you want to pore over every detail, which is why I think it merges the theme of meditation and actually giving you something to meditate on really well at the same time. It's quite a big book. It looks really daunting at first. It's about 200 pages, but like with most comics, 200 pages as it looks in front of you doesn't take as long to get through as it would a novel, so I wouldn't let that put you off. I'd really, really recommend this. I think you guys would like it, and I think it's an interesting counterpart to something like Legion, which is it's very comic booky in its own way. It has very comic book sensibilities, but it's trying really hard to be progressive and modern in the way that it depicts these, mental health issues. I think these two things would go together quite nicely. So that's the Nao of Brown, and that's by Glyn Dillon.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to pick that up. Definitely, that sounds really good.
I feel like I haven't done it justice. I think if you just Google some of the pages and see what the artwork is like, and it'll draw you in straight away. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah,
and it has a very striking look on the book itself, because it's a white cover, and then it has red pages. If you look at the spine, or the opposite side of the spine, and the edges of the pages are painted in red. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Anything like that kind of sort of speaks to me a little bit anyway. Anything that sort of brings mental illness to light like that. So yeah, I'll have to check that out. Leon, you've been having a bit of an issue lately, haven't you? Something that you wanted to bring up. Something of a dilemma.
I would frame it that way, a dilemma. So say for the last the 18 months or so while we've been doing the show, in an effort to be part of the zeitgeist and stay up to date and like current and relevant, as you guys have been as well. Like I've been picking up a lot of like number ones, reading the number ones, speaking about them on the podcast, picking up the number twos, following through maybe on the next episode of the podcast. Then what I noticed that I started to get into the cycle that I just kept adding to the to-do stack, the sort of virtual invisible stack that follows these ones and twos, and in some cases threes, where I'm starting all these series, but not having the opportunity to go back and see them through. And in terms of like pulling back the curtain a bit and how it relates to on the podcast, it's tough to talk about, like, say, issue 5 in an 8-issue run or something, because I can't get deep enough in terms of spoilers. And like to talk about it critically at that point, it's going to rely on me delving into some story issues. So like what I tend to do, what I've been tending to do on the cast is, for things that had shorter runs, like say 5 issues or so, when I completed the run, as Greg's done on many occasions, and as Rahul has done, going back and reevaluating after you read the final issue. But just the number of issue 1s, issue 2s I've been picking up, I felt it was time to like reshift my like focus and pull back from taking on too many number ones until I clear the virtual stack a bit. And with that, I created a list of a lot of the books that I enjoyed that I've started but not gone back and completed. And in that effort, I've been picking up some books that I even started before we started to doing the podcast that I've just never got around to the end. And one of those, which is a book or a series that I have spoken about on the cast before, is Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson's The Boys. And this one has been a tricky one to me, because when I originally started it, I got up to like an issue in the 20s, I think. And then I left it for a couple of years. And then on returning, I was like, let me just start from the beginning. And then the last time I was reading it, I got up to like issue 50, and there's 72 issues. But now I've left it again for like a year or so, or a year and a half. And now I'm in that dilemma where I'm not starting it again. And the way these are written, they're coming out month by month. So it ran between 2006 and 2012. So you were getting it monthly, and obviously they would probably miss a couple months here and there. But still, by that token, it's really frustrating. And I was like looking for like good like write-ups covering the trades or the arcs, and I couldn't really find anything. The best I could find, there isn't even a good wiki for that, because a lot of like long-running comics, so like say for like a Batman or something, you could go to like one of the many Batman wikis. You'll have a detailed breakdown of each run, or to some degrees each issue, which is great. But like that is not standard for all these things. And like the best I could do was like the Wikipedia entries for the arcs. And while it did get me sort of up to date and it reminded me of some stuff, there's so much like important details which are kind of skirted over. And then so I got the dilemma now of like, I'm not restarting it, but like jumping in now is going to be like such a hazy thing that I don't know if I'm going to lose stuff from just not remembering like certain details to do with what like big reveals and even just smaller character moments. I mean, I think what I've decided to do is carry on from where I am. So I did start the trade. So I got up to there's an arc from issue 48 to 51 called Proper Preparation and Planning, and I think I got to 50. So I restarted that one, and I'm going to just read it to the end and see how it feels. But I do feel like I'm missing out because I can't remember like little details that happened during like the Herogasm arc or during like some of the earlier ones, and it's so frustrating. I mean, have you guys ever been in a position like this? Like, you guys follow things like Saga currently at the moment, which I'm going to get onto in a sec. But like, do you ever, like, when there's been massive breaks between them, because you've been reading them monthly, is that enough? Or are there any ones where like you've left it for like a year or 6 months and you're like, oh man, like what the hell was happening again?
Well, oh, sorry, carry on, Ray.
Okay, I was going to say I had that with Naruto, where I read it for like 120 issues, and then I didn't read it for almost like 5 or 6 years or something, and then I wanted to catch up. So I actually did successfully find a good write-up of like everything up to the Shippuden arc, and then I just read through those and then picked up the manga again. So I think that worked out quite well. And then also with Saga, there was a point where I hadn't read it for like a good year maybe, because I just wasn't buying comics at that point. And then I just started the entire thing again. I just read all 20, 30 issues, which isn't that much in the grand scheme of things, but I did just start from the top.
There's certain things where, I mean, Saga, I read it as the trade comes out, so I'm always 6 months behind, but I do that on purpose. There's, I guess the best example I can come up with for something where I've been in that kind of position, I'm kind of on a treadmill at the moment with Berserk, the manga, because I started reading it, and I never really got up to date to begin with, but then like more stuff keeps getting published in front of me, and I've left it for I've not read any Berserk for about 4 years, and I know that the guy keeps going through he goes through huge hiatuses and things all the time, doesn't he? The publisher for Berserk, the guy who makes it, the writer, artist. But because I'm so far behind, I was so far behind anyway, that new stuff keeps getting put in front of me, and it's like being on a treadmill. That every time I get 2 chapters up, there's another 2 chapters in front anyway, so I'm no further along than I was to begin with, if that makes sense. And I'm just looking back at my shelf and my long boxes while I'm sat here talking to you guys, trying to think if there's anything else where, I mean, usually when I have like this to read stack, so there's always a stack of comics that haven't been bagged and board and haven't been read yet. And occasionally I'll get 2 or 3 of something and let it build up a little bit before I read it, and I'll read 2 or 3 in one go. If it's a new number 1, I try and read it straight away. They always take priority because those are the things that I like to talk about on the cast. But anything else... So again, I'm pulling back the veil here at the moment on the way that I do things and the way that I structure my reading time in order to provide content for this podcast. But so any number 1s will take priority. Anything else, so like I've just done with Legion, for example, I've caught up on 3 issues because I let that build up a little bit before coming to you guys and telling you now on this show, because it finished. So I let that build up and then I finished reading it, and I've probably got a couple of issues of something else in my to read pile somewhere that I've not kept up with, but it's usually like 2 or 3 issues, so that's 2 months or thereabouts that I kind of let build up in the back. And then I've got a few issues of Spider-Man built up actually that I've not read, but I kind of let them back up slightly sometimes, and because other things take priority and because I only get so much time, I have to read the things that I want to talk about, and the things that because I'm also like the kid that wants to eat his sweets before he eats everything else. Like I always like the things that I'm always super excited about. I will read straight away, and that takes reading time off other stuff that I'm currently reading and keeping up with. So, like something new and shiny, or something Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles goes straight to the top of the pile. So yeah, that's how that works with me.
Yeah, I definitely have that with video games, where I pick up the shiny new thing each time. And a video game example, actually, which ties into this, was The Witcher 3, where I played a good 20 hours of it, and then, again, dropped off because I found something new and shiny to play, and then I came back to it maybe a year later, and I had no idea what was going on, and I made an attempt to find, like, a good write-up, which wasn't going very well, so I tried to watch a few Let's Plays, which didn't really help, and then I asked a friend, a colleague at work, who's really into The Witcher, and I told her what was the last thing I got up to, and then she wrote me a Cliff Note edition using an existing wiki for the story. She pared it down so that it would cut out any spoilers I may or may not have already heard of. And even that didn't really help. So in the end I thought, just fuck it, and I carried on playing, and then I played for another 10 hours and then gave up because I couldn't be bothered. That was just one of those where it was a big fail in the end. Do
you know what I love? I love meeting people that are really passionate about stuff, that they can do things like that.
Oh, bless her. She tried... are you talking about my colleague or me?
About like just people in general that are super passionate about something, that they have it in them to provide the Cliff Notes version of something like that. You know, that's
I have all the love in the world for Zoe for doing that for me. Hi there, Zoe.
Yeah.
Shout out to you. But I don't know why you bothered, because you know what I'm like, and you knew it wasn't going to work out. But bless you for trying. So
you did it, and I was happy you did it, but it was fruitless.
Yes, 100%.
But no, I just a separate point. Just anybody that is that much of a fan of something, that they can create a resource like that. Like people I know that have written their own guides for video games for themselves. Like they have like ring bound. There's a guy I used to know at school who had a ring bound folder for Final Fantasy VII that he had written himself by hand, and it had diagrams in it, and he had like all sorts of stuff about chocobos and things like that, and like flavor text and all sorts.
I can respect that. That's cool.
Anyone that can produce that kind of resource by themselves off their own back, they're doing it out of interest, like for fun, you know. I respect that level, and I like it. And I maybe can with stuff already. I've never challenged myself, but one day I hope to be able to be able to provide other people with that kind of knowledge and impart it on them.
So some people scrapbook, some people write video game guides, some people make podcasts. So, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are a few things that I hope I'm like that with, but I'd like to be like that with, but I don't know. I've never tested myself. So, Ray, you had something that you wanted to bring up that had been shown to you by somebody.
Actually, so it was the same colleague I just mentioned, Zoe.
Yeah.
She brought me on to a comic called The MATADOR, which is by, if you give me one moment, Julia Lepetit, and she knows this artist through a show called Drawfee Show. I have no idea what it is. I'd never heard of it until Zoe told me about it. Apparently it's something to do with, like, people submit ideas for drawings and then they have to scribble down, like, make these really quick versions of these drawings to try and express it. I think it's kind of like, what is it? What's the game I'm thinking of, where the picture game where it's a party game where you have, like, you know, pen and pencil and you have to draw.
Pictionary.
Whatever. Pictionary, yes. I think it's kind of like that, but online. Anyway, so I found a tweet where she talks about this comic that she basically set herself some limits to make a comic that followed a couple of themes. So she says, trying to brainstorm ideas for my next 10-page comic. For The MATADOR, I set a bunch of challenges to force me to work on things I'm weak on. 10 pages, limited colour, no active dialogue, quote-unquote, relatably dark themes. So this book, which I think was pay what you want. So technically you can get it for free, but I think I threw in $5 for these 10 pages. And it's basically everything I just described. So, it's non-active dialogue, and it's all in light blue, dark blue, and white. And it depicts a woman going to a flower shop while possibly reminiscing or possibly showing a future dialogue. So some sort of dialogue between her and a friend or acquaintance about visiting a bar that the friend wants to go to. The speaker, or I assume the woman who we're seeing go to the flower shop, doesn't want to go, but in the end they decide to go. And it's this whole thing about holding on to anger but not being able to express it. And as far as I can discern for myself, because it's quite cryptic, and it's definitely not very explicit what's happening, but I assume it has something to do with having gone out and having encountered some I'm losing the words today, some tragedy with some guy that she encountered at the bar who maybe abused her or some other such act. And it's interesting because it's such a holistic comic where I think it's deliberately not giving up exactly what it is. It's very nebulous. So we see these scenes of her going into this flower shop, holding onto a bouquet, and then suddenly grasping onto the bouquet, like she's suddenly in tension when she's expressing, "No, I don't want to go to this bar," to her friend, and it suddenly flashes in red while that's happening. And so for ages I was like, it's only 10 pages. There can't be much to pick apart on this. And I was thinking, is it one thing? Is it that she's reminiscing about something that happened to her friend, and she wishes that she hadn't convinced her, she wishes that her friend hadn't convinced her to go with her? Or is it something that happened to her and she's, now about to do something? Because the way the comic ends is we see her taking some flowers out of the flower shop, going to the bar that was mentioned, which is called the MATADOR, and in her bag we see gasoline. And then it flashes, the final panel I think is a flash of a menacing guy with a red grin on his face as water streaks down a window pane through the bar, saying "Don't go there alone." And so I was wondering, is it that she's about to do something violent and dangerous, to this guy, or maybe to the bar in general? And I realized I was spending so long trying to solve the puzzle of the comic, and when I realized I was doing that, I kind of sat back and just let it wash over me and realized that it's about all of these things. It could be about any of these things. It could be about just trying to express how difficult it is to have this anger, have this pain, and not know how to express it, or not even be able to express. It could be so much of this. Yeah. And I really admire it for being able to make me go through that process, to go through that journey. So I'd recommend that. I mean, if you wanted to, you could get it for free. I'll provide the link in the show notes. It's The Matador by Julia Lepetite. And it's really good. Sorry. No, go ahead.
I'm going to say I looked at this too, because you brought it to my attention. And I get the feeling that it's the way it's framed is that it is memories of something that happened. And it's bad memories of something awful that happened due to a visit to the Matador. And I think maybe the burning of the place at the end, or whatever she does at the end, is her way of trying to come to terms with that, or her way of trying to release that or exact revenge or something like that. And I love the way this flashes from red to blue, like hot and cold. So the burning awful memories are framed in red. And one of them almost looks like it's viewed through a monster's eye. Which, and it's pretty cool how that works. And like you were saying, you almost, as you said, you don't see, for trying to work it out, you forget that it's a piece of art.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly about some sort of process, whether it's either harmful or a healing process.
Yeah.
But just even being able to express that much and having it be unclear, but still being able to express that
in 10 pages.
There's something to it, and I really like it, and I really want people to look at it. But it got me thinking about how we try so hard to solve the puzzle, and this is something we've talked about off the podcast. We've chatted about it in our WhatsApp group, and it's a topic that's come up recently a few times in like different tweet streams. I forget who it was, but there was somebody talking about there's nothing worse than articles which claim we've solved the puzzle. Here's everything you need to know about what this particular piece of art is expressing, what it is expressing, not what it could be or what it might be trying to say, but here's everything we found. Like, I think the most recent one was This Is America, and it's picking out all the different bits and bobs.
I was going to say, this whole conversation seems to have been prompted by the This Is America music video.
I just wonder what the compulsion is, because I think I went through this whole journey myself with this comic where I fell into trying to figure out what it meant before pulling back and trying to understand what it was trying to express.
I think it's a compulsion to understand the art in front of you, because people want, when you see something, you want to understand it. You don't necessarily want to see the cogs and everything operating behind it, but you want to understand what you're looking at. It's this need to understand. And I think this could be partly due to the way we're educated at school. Because I don't know about you, but I was given an anthology of poems to study at one point in my school life, and we were encouraged to break them down in this way, and to take this piece of art, this whole, and section it up, and we were encouraged to write about it in such a way for an exam where we were encouraged to write things like, he uses this word because this word is harsher than this word, and this word's denotes this kind of feeling, and you can hear such and such happening through through the syllables in lines X, Y, and Z or whatever, and I don't know if that's got anything to do with it, the way that we're taught at school and the way that we're encouraged to break art down like that. Because even when I was doing art lessons at school as well, when I was like traditional art, where we were painting and things like that, and we were encouraged to look at other pieces of art and paint in the style of other artists and that kind of thing, or to attempt it anyway. And we were encouraged to break down other pieces of art. We were asked how it makes us feel, and why we believe they use this particular color on this particular in this particular way, and why technique X has been used to illustrate figure Y in the background of scene Z or whatever. It's to break it down in that kind of way is almost what we're encouraged to do.
Well, I think all of that is useful.
Yeah,
and I do. I think I agree with you that it's the root of an issue, because I feel like it is a good thing to be able to deconstruct or to interrogate art, like beyond just the mood and the aesthetic. Yeah. Because you don't always have to look for tangible or concrete meaning in things, but it's interesting to be able to find it. But I think the internet generation, or like the internet at large, has exacerbated that. I think for all of the things that. Gamified it, yeah, for sure. Because all of those things, all of these techniques and tools that we learned at school, and that's what they are, we're supposed to learn them as a tool set, not the way to read things. This is not how you're supposed to. It's because a way that you can.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when you've deconstructed it, you're still supposed to be able to view it as a whole. But what's happening is now people are taking things apart to the point where it's just cogs and springs, and all you will see is cogs and springs, and you're not enjoying the whole anymore. You're just seeing the cogs and springs.
I mean, there's some merit to it, but then I think there's a lot of arrogance that comes along with it, especially with like, oh, you didn't understand this, here, let me teach you what it actually meant.
Yeah, like there's a right and a wrong way to interpret something.
Yeah, or even just like allowing yourself the time to get there yourself, because I think I'm very guilty of this, but like jumping straight onto TV tropes to see everything that other people have picked apart, and like the groupthink. Like mass mentality of picking out and finding all the things, which again can be really fun, but again sometimes it does harm you when on a personal level you don't take enough time to let something gestate.
Again, ripping back the curtains on this podcast, when I look at comics and when I prepare to talk about comics, I try to get it across this way anyway, but I will talk about various the various ways things are shown and various artistic techniques in comics and things like that when I talk about a certain comic. But what I always try to do is pull it back and to tell you how that works as a whole, rather than just deconstructing it and leaving it deconstructed. And I would never once want to think that I have told you that there is a right and a wrong way to interpret something.
Yeah, and I think that's the root of this argument, isn't it? Because, as Ralph was saying, deconstructing and like critical analysis is so useful, and it's fundamentally a way for us to understand art deeper than a surface level.
Yeah.
And I think what, as you guys have said, the thing that has sort of messed it up in recent times is this false prescribing of definitive answers, where you'll have like top 10 things you missed or what X means, and it's like,
and
what?
Yeah,
like the thing that's great with like deconstruction and all this is what different viewers or readers or whatever bring to that particular thing, because we're all we've all like had different experiences in life and different interactions with other pieces of art, and there's certain things that an experience I will have never had that you guys might have had that will change the way you read a particular visual or like a line in a book or something. And on the flip side, there is like things that I will pick up from my different interactions with other things that you guys will never have seen from that point of view. And like that puts like that is like a special sauce in it. I think that in this internet age where people want to solve everything, like it's treating it like a game where it's like, oh, I beat that game, I clocked it, I completed it, and it's just like, who can get all the secrets, who can find all the Easter eggs, and then once we're done with that, we've solved this piece of art, we can toss it to the side now, we've dealt with that, move on to the next one. And that's not what this stuff is about. By interrogating it and linking it to other things and finding meaning in different things, that's meant to like prolong the life of these pieces of art. Like you can't complete it, and even stuff like this over obsession with canonization and like, what is the one true way this can be read? Oh, this is what the author said, this is what the director said, and it's like, yeah, that's valid, but there's always going to be unintended meaning in these things, and by like killing it at the end in that way and being like, okay, we're done, let's move on, it does a disservice to not only the art, but like it impacts how we as a culture learn to like read and decipher art. And that's why you can get like these hot takes that come out, and I'm like, well, like what? Like we as a culture discussed this 5 years ago. Why are you like cooking up this like lukewarm take on this thing? Like it's because we don't really have a good relationship with our history anymore, because it's all about now and tomorrow. And it's quite sad, because like these things, let's say going back to the This Is America video, they're meant to encourage discussion, and we're meant to like sort of argue the merits of what different things and what they could mean. But to have things going like, okay, this is it, we've deciphered it, is just so reductive.
Like it's a riddle there to be deciphered, and there's only one correct answer. Yeah,
and it's like, I think that it leads to a lot of disappointment in in things as well, where if something doesn't line up the way that people have built it in their head, then they disregard it. It's like, oh, the ending of this was rubbish because it wasn't what I built it up in my head to be. And I think there's too much of a conservative thinking around like art, meaning, intertextuality, and just the very basics of like semiotics. I think because we're very much a now and the next thing culture, because life is like bam, 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 fast. Like I personally, I think I brought up on the cast before, like usually if I watch a movie or something like that, I do have the impulse to like listen to the spoiler specials of my favorite podcasts and do some reading online. But in the last couple of years, I've made a big like effort to like just leave it for a while, because often I need like at least a day, but sometimes like a few days to let it percolate in my mind a bit. And it's been useful for me because now I know what my own conclusions are before I start listening to other people's, where before on the train home, I would have that spoiler podcast on, or I'd be looking on the website for other people's opinions. And then years later, I'd be like, what was my actual opinion on this? I've just become part of the group think.
This is why sometimes I don't read like letters pages or other people's reviews of comics before I've put my own thoughts together.
Yeah.
Because
I started writing down what I think about something before I start listening to the podcast, because I know that my memory is hazy, and I may end up adopting somebody else's opinion as my own, which I don't think is inherently bad, because you can exchange ideas and you can pick up and learn from other people. But
it's bad
I want to know what I want to know what my baseline was before adopting all of those things. And like sometimes it's nice to know that, oh, this person that I really respected or this person that I do really respect made a point that I also thought of, and like it just feels nice sometimes from that perspective. Giving stuff time is always nice, I think.
Yeah, it's not good to mute your own opinion in favour of someone else's. When you read somebody else's opinion, it kind of stifles your own, and it's not good.
I do like works that kind of push you away from that, though. Like, for example, very recently, Twin Peaks. Yeah. It sort of, it gives you a reason to not do that. It actively stops you from trying to penetrate into it too much, because one, it ruins it for you, and two, it's incomprehensible in a lot of ways. Yeah. So you kind of end up, even if you do attempt to try and pick it all apart, you end up going in circles, and then you just let it wash over you. And I think that's great, but it's actively doing that. Like, it's designed that way in some ways. So not everything can be that.
No, and I'm going to bring the tone of the conversation right down now. Because I'm going to talk about TMNT Urban Legends #1. Yes. So, what happened was IDW listened to the fans, supposedly. And they've started re-releasing the Image Comics run of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as single issues. And they're not just re-releasing it, they're finishing it off, because it was, you had the original Image run, which was also known as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Volume 3, ran for so many issues, and they never finished it off. There was like a couple missing off the end. But what they've done is they've got the original team back together to finish off the run. So they're going to actually bring it to a proper ending as they re-release it, which is kind of a cool thing. And it's kind of cool to be able to read this in full, because I have brushed with this run before. But I've never really sat down and read the whole thing. I've just heard things about it that I thought were kind of weird, like the fact that at some point Raphael decides he's going to be Shredder, and weird things happen to the Turtles. Like this run has no qualms about changing what we know about the characters. Like Donatello ends up as a cyborg at some point. Raph gets facially disfigured. We know that Leo loses a hand. Splinter ends up as a bat. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this, gonna go right out and say it's not my favourite Turtles, but it's Turtles. And it's, I don't know, it's just some weird choices of how this got put together, and I can understand, like, it's not being considered canon. It's not considered canon, this run, because Peter Laird didn't want anything to do with it. So we're just we're just sailing into this kind of like weird space that Turtles ended up in one time during the 90s. And has it aged very well, I guess, is the question I should be trying to answer to you guys. And I'm going to say probably not. It's very much what you would expect of the era. The art is very much typical of the 90s, of a 90s comic. These books were originally black and white, and we're now getting them in colour. It's very 90s, and some of the dialogue choices as well, especially, and also the character designs and the way they're drawn. And you see this snapshot of what the comics were in the 1990s, and you're looking at it with 2018 eyes. And I think I mentioned this to you, didn't I, Leon?
Yeah.
Like a couple of days ago when I was reading it, I was like, my 2018 eyes are having trouble with this very 90s comic.
Yeah, it's like you transported in time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, as I say, character designs, and in character designs and in dialogue choices, like there's this half-naked ninja, female ninja character, and she is very much half-naked, and she's almost wearing bondage gear, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yep. And there's the she invades the turtle lair with these two cyborgs in the middle of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles' birthday, which is hilarious in itself. So it's like their 18th birthday, and they're all celebrating, and there's a birthday cake. Then all of a sudden, Donatello gets shot up. The first page is Donatello getting shot up. Then like these two cyborgs come in, these two buff, hyper 90s cyborg characters, hyper 90s comic cyborgs with organic metal cells that can repair themselves and rebuild severed limbs and stuff like that, you know. And it's just it's cheesy, and I guess part of the reason I like it is because it's kind of trash. But I mean, like, it does have its problems, as I say, in the way, even in this first issue, straight away, the way it depicts this female character, and the way the Turtles talk about her as well. Yeah,
you showed the screenshot, and it's not good.
I know.
And like you're saying, coupled with her outfit, which has like, you get like midriff windows,
yeah,
you get like boob windows, sometimes you get like arse windows in these costumes. This has like a pelvic window. Like her like anatomy is just so 90s.
Yeah, it's like they drew her naked, then drew clothes on as an afterthought.
Yeah, it's like, what can we get away with?
And not even clothes, just strips of fabric.
Yeah, because she kind of has a look a bit of like Elektra.
Yeah, but it's like Elektra to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Because
but just it's like mega generic.
Yeah. And it just struck me, like, looking at this now, reading it now, it just struck me as, I'm not into this, And it does have its problems, and it's very of its time, and it's like it's almost trying to be ridiculously edgy. So I don't know, because the Ninja Turtles started out as edgy anyway. Like the Turtles comics in the 80s were these underground, super violent books that, super violent, violent underground books. And, they didn't shy away from some of the stuff that comics were kind of, like some of the I guess comics were getting grim dark back then anyway, but they were dark anyway to begin with. And then this kind of takes it to the next level, I guess. I guess that was what this run tried to do, which is what happens with all this OTT stuff happening to the Turtles, like them losing arms and things like that. But I don't know. It either feels like it was trying to parody 90s comics, or it was just being very of the time and just took it to the nth degree and ended up being quite crass in places because of that. I don't know. Like, to the point that even the crass and problematic even in places when it did that. But yeah, I mean, yeah. I was excited to get to reread it, and I guess that put a dampener on it to read the bits that I hadn't already read. And when I opened this first issue, I guess that kind of put a little bit of a dampener on it for me, and it's hard for me to see why this is something the fans wanted. Because I consider myself a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan. Anyone who knows me would consider me a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, I hope. And this isn't something that I would have asked for, particularly. I mean, you know, it's as a Turtles fan, I'm not the type of Turtles fan that would ask for this to be reprinted, so it makes me think, I wonder who would. But yeah, I mean, it's good to have it there for me to be able to reread it and to be able to see, you know, and yeah, I'm not, the more I talk about it and the more I think about it, the more that I'm not into this run at all.
And yeah, like, to contradict myself from like 5 minutes ago, it's not canon anyway.
Exactly, yeah. And I was excited about it a couple of weeks ago when I heard they were re-releasing it, because I was thinking, oh yeah, I get to read it, but then I come across this. This is the bit, these are parts that I haven't read before, things that I hadn't seen up to now, because I'd never read the first issue. As I said, I just read certain parts of it and seen certain bits to know what happens, like with Raph becoming Shredder and stuff like that. But, you know, yeah, there we go. And this was Image Comics in the 90s, so I guess a lot of 90s Image stuff was the more grimmer, the more darker, wasn't it? That was the whole point of Image back then, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, it's all of them escaping the more, conservative, like, big companies they were with at the time.
Getting away from those rounded edges that Marvel and DC were imposing on them.
Mm.
But I think this is like a level above, I guess, maybe. And I think it's, viewing it with 2018 eyes, it just does not wash with me, and it probably won't wash with a lot of people because of that, because of the times we live in now, and because of how, you know, how things are. But it's a snapshot of comics back then, and it's, yeah, you can see the problems that comics had and the problems that some comics probably still have reflected in these pages. So there you go, as a learning point, that's what you get from it. And yeah, that's me lowered the whole entire tone of the cast so far by bringing that up. If you're interested, that's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Urban Legends, and that is Gary Carlson, the author, Frank Fosco is the artist and cover artist. Eric Larson did a cover for it, and he's also an inker. We've got Chance Wolf inker, and Adam Gazowski, the colorist. So yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I can't see why this ended up getting reprinted, to be honest. That's the point I'm taking away from this. Like, why did this get reprinted? Because it's not something that, as a Turtle fan, I would have wanted. And I'm now thinking twice about picking the rest of it up, even though there were certain things in there that I wanted to read again. But there we go. I don't know. I really don't know. Where do we go from there? Well, we move on to another comic by IDW, which is the Spider King, which is another one that I'm now at the end of. We're at the end of Spider King Chapter 1, as it were. And this is one of those comics, it's already collected, so you can already go out and buy the whole thing. Because it was released as a collection before it got this 4-part miniseries treatment. It was crowdfunded, so that might have had something to do with it, but I don't know. So we're at the blood-soaked end of Chapter 1. Vikings vs. Aliens comes to its final conclusions, and I loved it. I loved how they have managed to fuse this medieval and sci-fi world into a fun, action-packed, visceral cartoon hurricane with a sense of humour. And the device they've used to achieve this is really something. It's really cool. So one of the things that, when you look at a comic like this, you think, oh, the sci-fi element's going to overwhelm it, because how do you pit these two opposing worlds against each other without having the easily more advanced and technologically capable world overwhelming these medieval, like, sword-toting angry guys, you know? And it does it really well. And it's really cool how they've managed to fit it all together, I have to say, without spoiling it too much. And the cartoon styling of the book lends itself well to the over-the-top action that we get in the pages. It's violence, and along with the beautiful colours and everything else, it just all gels together so well. And as violent as the book is, it's not like I don't know. It's not OTT that it puts you off if you're not into, because even not being like, I don't know, it's just the way it works together with the colours and everything else is just so cool. And some of the alien designs and everything else in this book with this art style that this book has. I mean, we've talked about this book previously, but it just really gels together really well. And it really does a great job of what it's trying to get across. And it's quite a triumph in that way, actually, because I've never read anything like it before. And we have these awesome alien designs. We have the Spider King, which is like an extraterrestrial parasite. And it's just, I want to talk about this stuff, but I can't without ruining it for you. And that would ruin the point of me talking about it, because I'm supposed to get you to read it. And the action, like the way, I mean, I talked about the way it describes action, but the way it displays action and the way it displays, like with the character designs and the dynamic expressions on people's faces in this book and everything else, this cartoon style of this book is really cool. And it revels in its outlandish violence and everything else, and there's some really cool comedy elements to it along the way as well, which is quite nice. And I have a fave character. She goes by the name of Sigrid, and she is a badass. And that is definitely one worth picking up. So, yeah, grab the collected edition. You can find the separate issues, grab the separate issues, because I will 100% recommend that book. And that is on IDW Comics. And we have a creative team of Josh Van, who is the author, Simone Diamini, who is the artist and cover artist, David Rubin is the cover artist, and Adrian Block is the colorist. And it is available in print. So yeah, Spider King. It's definitely one worth grabbing.
That's cool. Just
for the fact that it does something really different. I mean, how often do you see the extraterrestrial and the medieval cross paths in anything? You know? So that brings me on to the last thing on my list, which I wanted to draw attention to. So I'll just draw attention to this really quickly. And that is the recent Hit Girl comic that we've been getting. Now, as I've again, this is something else I've spoken about before, and I did sort of like shade at the beginning of the cast that I was going to be talking about a lot of things that have already finished or have come to an end, things that I've been following and have now hit their end. So, this Hit Girl book, it's high octane, adrenaline fueled, gun toting, bomb planting, wild action, as you might expect from something set within the Kick-Ass universe involving Hit Girl. It's going to have guns in it, it's going to have violence in it, because that's what these books do. So she's been in Colombia, and she's had this whole kind of like mad scheme worked out where she is using a cartel hitman to wipe out other criminals. And there's this whole thing is building up to this one big masterstroke at the end, which obviously gets revealed in this final book. And it's just the sheer devastation that they leave in their wake is hilarious in itself. Like, she completely, like, she goes through that place with a steamroller. Like, when she's taking these guys out, these cartel guys don't even stand a chance.
Is this, like, does it have any crossover with the recent Kick-Ass run?
No, it doesn't. They're completely independent of each other right now. I don't know if they're planning to cross them up later on, but right now they're completely independent of each other. And it's just brilliant fun. The violence, while gratuitous, it's got a sense of humour, and the art lends itself well to this. Again, as I'm going back to what I said about the Spider King, but this is in a similar vein in the way that it communicates movement and the way that it communicates facial expressions, and it's very manga-inspired art. So, you know how manga is very good at communicating speed and fast movements and, like, cars rushing down roads and things like that.
Yeah, like there's a certain, like, kinetic energy visible on the page.
Yeah, and manga's very good at that, because manga's very good at doing fast-paced action, like quick punches and fast reactions and things like that. And this is very inspired by that. It's got this very manga thing going for it. And the facial expressions as well, especially like pain or shock when people are getting beat up and blown apart. It just gives it this slapstick edge that makes you laugh at it when you shouldn't. Because you're laughing at these atrocities in these pages of this comic, but at the same time, it's actually funny because of the way that it's framed and the way that it's drawn. I'm not sure if that's a good thing to say, really, but there we go. And it's yeah, it's just great at what it does, and it's great at being just, you know, like mindless. This kind of like this mindless slapstick violence that it has with it, and it's just good at that. And it makes me laugh when I'm reading it, and you're laughing out loud when there's really terrible things happening. But then the way that it looks on the page is that you're meant to, you know. And it's just all great, all of it. And going back to what I was saying about this whole, like, hit girl coming in like a wrecking ball and like into Columbia like a wrecking ball. Well, you've got like the front cut, the cover for issue 4 of this run is kind of like the icing on the cake as far as that goes, because it is literally a parody of the Miley Cyrus wrecking ball video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you've got Hit Girl on a wrecking ball that looks like Planet Earth coming in through a wall. Kind of like the Miley Cyrus wrecking ball video. And it's great. She's like busting in through this wall, like yelling something into the air, happy with herself, you know. And yeah, it's just great. And next stop for issue 5 is a new creative team. We've got Jeff Lemire, and we're going to Canada. So that's going to be fun. See what happens in Canada. Like, literally, I think we're going to be getting, like, every so many issues, we're going to be getting a new destination and possibly a new creative team, which is a cool way to handle it. I quite like that. So yeah, next stop Canada, after Colombia, after the sheer devastation that she's left behind in Colombia, which I was totally on board with. And the creative team behind that one, we've got the writer Mark Miller, the artist Ricardo Lopez Ortiz. The cover is by Amy Reeder, and we have a variant cover which is Amy Reeder, and we have variant covers by Amy Reeder and Matteo Scalera. And this was published May 23rd, so that was like literally last New Comics Day. So yeah, you can wait for that to be, I'm sure that's going to get collected into the first volume. I'm sure it's going to be like a 4-issue volume, or if they're still on the shelves, go and grab them. In fact, yes, it is a 4-issue volume, because I've just seen here Hit Girl Hit Girl Volume 1 TP, which I believe is supposed to be out June 20th, and that will be Hit Girl in Colombia, so that's like the first bit. and the cover for that is Hit Girl walking away from an epic explosion going on behind her and some crazy fireworks, which is foreshadowing for things that actually happen. So yeah, give it a go. It's great. And that kind of wraps up my list right now. I don't think I've got any more. I think I'm all comicked out. I think that just brings us on to sort of like your last one, doesn't it, Liam?
Yeah. I won't spend too long on this. I'm probably going to speak about it more in detail in a future cast, and we're running a bit long. But as part of what I was saying earlier, in terms of catching up with comics that I've started, I started the Wicked and the Divine, which is the comic written by Kieran Gillen and the art done by Jamie McKelvey. And this is the book that follows a young teenage girl called Laura as she interacts with the Pantheon, which is a group of 12 people who discover that they are reincarnated gods. And so what happens once they discover this, they get fame and like supernatural powers, and they're worshipped. But there's a stipulation that they will die within 2 years as part of this 90-year cycle known as the recurrence. And it's basically, so at the time, back in 2014, this started in June 2014, I was reading it monthly, and I read the equivalent of the first 2 trades. And then I dropped off, and I was just waiting for more trades to come off. But then I just left it. And so this ended up pretty high on my list to revisit. So I started from the beginning, the first trade, which collects issues 1 to 5, and the trade is, well, the arc that the trade's named after is the Faust Act. And it's nice diving back in. I've always been a fan of Gillen and McKelvey. I really like their work on Phonogram and Young Avengers. And there's just something really funny with how Gillen's writing embodies these characters. It's that very sort of idiosyncratic, people thinking out loud to themselves, and lots of like weird and funny references to like current times. And this is set quite current, or current for when it first started. And things like social media and the media in general, and the notion of like obsession and worship and pop stars and celebrities plays like a big part in there. And it being focused on gods, there's a lot of crossover, at least on the surface, with, say, Neil Gaiman's American Gods. But yeah, going back and starting this again, I think it hits the ground running in a really cool way. It introduces these gods who have such great designs, as McKelvey is just known for. Really clean lines, just really cool like outfit designs, really cool like the way he captures like facial expressions. It's just so they're natural, but like just really well done, where you can just read completely what the character is thinking in lieu of like a thought bubble. So yeah, I'm loving jumping back into there, and I will be checking in with this as I read it to get up to date. Currently, I believe there are 40 issues, 36 regular and 4 specials. And I'm going to catch up and be up to date, and as I catch up and finish The Boys. So I'll be checking back in with this, and I've got more to say about it that even avoids like spoilers for the most part. But yeah, I'm really enjoying going back to this, and I'll just add an extra shout out to Matt Wilson, who is the colorist. And when listeners to the show know I go on about the image colors and the purple and the fusion, when I get a good image book, the type of feeling and look that I get. And I think I remember Wilson's work being like a very big part of that. I just love the tones that he uses. But yeah, I'll speak more about this on a future episode. But yeah, definitely loving jumping back into the wicked and the divine.
Yeah. That's one that's been on my... I've got this like heavy list of things that I need to that I would love to start reading, and that's one of them. So I need to get on that at some point. That's the last of the comics, isn't it? That's brought us to the end. So I guess that just leaves us to be complete shills, doesn't it, Leon? And talk about something else that we've done recently. Which involved us having to watch Batman Ninja.
Indeed, Batman Ninja.
Yeah, so this is us being a shill for another podcast that we've been on, which is an episode of Dynamite in the Brain, where me and Leon discuss Batman Ninja, which I believe that should be releasing soon.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when it's out, but it will be... I reckon it will be in close proximity to the release of this episode.
Yeah. So there's an episode where me and Leon kind of sort of give our opinions on the recent straight-to-Blu-ray DC offering that is Batman Ninja. And yeah, go listen to Dynamite in the Brain and see what we think. That's Dynamite in the Brain with Brian and Askew, which you can find them on Facebook and everywhere, pretty much. Same place you can find us.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's a great... opportunity because the Venn diagram of comics and anime, which is what their podcast is centered on, come straight together, and right in the middle there is Batman Ninja, and we get into it and we discuss it, and it was a really fun discussion. It's always nice to jump on a podcast with Brian and Askew and sort of hash it out. It's always a lot of fun doing that. So yeah, definitely check that out.
It is. It's always good to kind of have a conversation with those guys and jump on with those guys, like you say. It's always good fun, and it's always a nice opportunity to when the paths cross for comics and anime or whatever, and we get these cool sort of like one shot movies and things like that. It's always a great opportunity to sort of talk about that, and it's great. So yeah, go and check that one out because it's cool. And
Dynamite in the Brain.
Yes, and as I've said before, you can find them everywhere you can find us. So when I reel off the list at the end of this episode, pretty much you'll find them everywhere as well. And pull list time. So during this recording, Ray has had to duck out. He wanted me to say bye on his behalf. It was as we were talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Really, he had to leave. He had to leave the recording.
Yeah, he just couldn't take any more.
Yeah, he couldn't take any more of it. I brought the conversation down to such a low level that he just had to leave the room. He's so incensed and disgusted.
Pelvic windows are the line.
Oh, that comic. Oh dear. Anyway. So, the more I think about that book, the more I'm starting to think, like, even though I love the Turtles, I just don't want to buy the rest of it. I probably won't buy the rest of it. If it's all in the same... I mean, other than the bits I've already read, I mean, I knew it was going to be grim dark 90s anyway, but if it's all in the same kind of vein as that, then I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy it. But onto the pull list. So, coming out this week, the 30th of 5th, 2018. So I'm going to do my list and I'm going to do Ray's list. So for me, we've got Barrier number 5, which is the end of Barrier. It's been weekly and it's been only available in print unless, as Leon pointed out last time we talked about Barrier, you can go to the, there's a website where you can still get it, isn't there? And it's like pay what you want at the moment. We've got Versus number 4. The Realm number 6. The Realm has been one of my favourite comics from sort of like end of last year, beginning of this year. And I wholeheartedly recommend it. It is post-apocalyptic fantasy. So Dungeons and Dragons meets Mad Max, I guess. or Dungeons and Dragons meets The Last of Us is probably a better way to put it. We've got a comic called Blackwood. It'll be a number 1, and this is something new from Dark Horse. And I'm going to read out the previews blurb for this one. So, Blackwood, from the multi-Eisner Award-winning creator of Beasts of Burden and the artist of Archie and Slam, comes this supernatural fantasy about a magical murder in a sorcery school. When 4 teenagers with haunted pasts enroll in Blackwood College, a school that trains students in the occult, their desire to enhance their supernatural abilities and bond with others is hampered by an undead dean's curse. Ghosts in their dorm, a mischievous 2-headed mummy chimp, and a plague of mutant insects. Instantly appeals to me. And the discovery of an ancient evil that forces our heroes to undergo a crash course in the occult for the sake of the world. So, what I'm getting from this is I'm getting vibes of Harry Potter. I'm also getting vibes like a kind of a darker Harry Potter, I guess, is what I'm getting from this, and I'm kind of into it. I'm going to buy it and see what it's all about, because the cover looks really cool as well. Anyway, it's like a black cover with lots of pinks and purples going on, so it's like this kind of like neon thing, this neon black and yellow, like standing out bright off this black background. Lots of pinks, lots of purples, lots of like kind of neon blues and stuff, and it just looks like severely cool, basically. So that's something that's on my list, and that is definitely up my alley, and I should be picking that up on Wednesday. And that is writer Evan Dorkin and cover artist Veronica Fish. We've got Batman, Prelude to the Wedding, Robin versus Ra's al Ghul. So I guess in the lead up to Batman and Catwoman getting married, we're getting this kind of like prelude to the wedding thing, and then the wedding's probably going to be some multi-part event, I'm not sure. But far be it from DC to miss an opportunity to sell comics like that. So we've got like these kind of like prelude to the wedding thing that are going to be going on, and this week we've got Robin and Ra's al Ghul. So that's Robin Damien, Ra's al Ghul being Robin's granddad. And we've got Doomsday Clock number 5. We've got Infinity Countdown Captain Marvel, which is part of the ongoing Infinity Countdown event that Marvel are doing right now. We've got Abbott number 5. I believe that's the end of Abbott, isn't it, Leon? Is that the last one?
I'm not sure. I
thought it was only a short thing.
Yeah, I remember being short. It might be 5. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that's the end, but don't quote me on that, because it could be 6. But I was pretty sure that it was going to have a short run, and I had it in my head somewhere that it was 5. So we'll say that, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But yeah, that Abbott's been really cool so far. I've really been enjoying reading that, and I've been keeping up with that, and that's definitely one for the long box, one for the ages. If you've not been buying it monthly, then definitely one to pick up when it's collected, because it'd be a good addition to anyone's bookshelf.
I co-sign that. Yep.
We've got Jughead the Hunger as well, number 6. So this is Jughead as a werewolf. Burger-loving werewolf in Riverdale, I guess is the best way to put it. American Werewolf in Riverdale, I don't know. But yeah, Jughead the werewolf. And Betty is a werewolf hunter. And it just all spirals on from there. It's one of these Archie horror book type things. So yeah, it's cool. And keeping in the same kind of trend, we've got Vampironica number 2, which is Veronica as a vampire. Again, Archie Comics. What was it you were saying about Riverdale being Hellmouth at one point, Leon?
Yeah, seemingly.
Everything happens in Riverdale. So yeah, I mean, like, I'm into this. The first Vampironica book was really cool. We talked about it on the cast. The first one had a really sweet Francavilla variant, which I've got as my current phone background. And in case you haven't realised, I am a big Francavilla fan. He's like one of my favourite artists. So This new book has a Francavilla variant cover, which I'm really into. So yeah, definitely. We've got another one actually that popped up on my radar that I talked about at the beginning of this cast, which was Star Wars Lando Double or Nothing. Right at the beginning of this cast, we sort of mentioned that when you guys, Leon and Ray, were talking about the solo movie. So yeah, that should be pretty cool. Moving on to Ray's list. So this is Ray's list for the 30th of May. He's got John Wick number 4. John Wick. That's all I can say about that. I've not read any of the John Wick comic, but Ray rates it, and I rate the John Wick movies because John Wick. Aren't we getting a John Wick 3 soon? Hasn't that been...
Yeah, they released some publicity shots from it as well.
Yeah, John Wick. John fucking Wick. We've got Ms. Marvel number 30. Ray is a big Ms. Marvel fan, and the stories of Kamala Khan. She's a great character, and the Ms. Marvel books are really cool. You should pick that up. So we've also got Lost Children, 2021 Lost Children, which the blurb for this one is that it is for fans of Akira, Domu, A Child's Dream, Ghost in the Shell, and Children of Men. And it's been touted. It's been sold as Escape from New York meets the X-Men. It's 2021. Detroit has seceded from the United States, and its citizens are under the control of a madman with extraordinary abilities. The only hope of retaking the city lies with 4 superpowered children, but their powers come with a price. Using them means aging prematurely. Can they save the city before their powers use up their lives? Sounds really cool. The big draw for me with this one is the fact that we've got a Stokoe cover for it. So James Stokoe, one of my favourite artists, done some really cool Godzilla books. He's good at drawing junk, piles and piles of beautiful junk, and really detailed drawings. He's good at that, and this cover plays to his strength. It looks really cool. We have Vagrant Queen number 1. So Vagrant Queen, former child queen Alida was driven from her throne at age 10 and forced to wander the galaxy, evading the revolutionary forces that wanted her dead. When an old frenemy claims to know the whereabouts of Alida's long-lost mother, she is forced to return to her former kingdom and stage a rescue. Interstellar badassery by Eisner-nominated writer Magdalene Visaggio of the comic Kim and Kim, and its artist Jason Smith. So I don't know, is Kim and Kim a comic? I'm not sure. I believe it must be in this context. But this is one that Ray was looking forward to. And it does look kind of cool. It's kind of like this sci-fi thing going on for it. And the art is very, very painted, very free and borderless, which is always kind of nice to see. We're on to the 6th of the 6th now, for real. So there's a book that popped on my radar called Sword Daughter that's coming out, which is very briefly a story of revenge, and it's basically a whole village is wiped out, save for a young girl and her grief-stricken father, and they set off on a revenge quest that spans sort of like entirety of Viking Age Europe, and they find the key to repairing their damaged relationship lies in the swords that they carry, and it is basically a Viking revenge saga inspired by Lone Wolf and Cub. So that sounds pretty good. It's one to look out for. We've got Isola number 3, another Batman prelude to the wedding, and this time it's Nightwing and Hush. We've also got Ghostbusters Crossing Over number 3, which is part of the ongoing Ghostbusters Crossing Over event, which brings together Ghostbusters from across the Ghostbusters multiverse all into one healthy comic, which is really cool. And for Ray, we've got on the 6th of 6th, he's got Sword Daughter, which we've just talked about, and also Dazzler X Song. Dazzler being the super 70s disco queen mutant. I don't know if you've ever brushed with Dazzler before, Leon.
Only intellectually, like I've read things about her and like stories, but never. Like, I've always heard about her in a novel. Like, man, when is it Marvel? Marvel?
Yeah, Marvel.
Yeah, it's like, oh, when Marvel get to Dazzler, we'll know that we've done everything. I always know about it in that context.
Yeah, Dazzler is she's a mutant, and she appears in a lot of X-Men comics and has been in a few X-Men books that I own, actually. I've known her in the sort of like disco queen context because she's usually portrayed as a disco singer. But in this one, there's never been a cooler time to be a mutant in the Brooklyn punk scene. Straight away, out of the gates, Dazzler is now fronting a punk band. And the image we get of Dazzler on the front cover is she's looking very punk. She's got an undercut hairdo. She's shouting into a microphone, wearing a leather studded jacket and stuff like that. You know, studded belt, sort of like pretty punk get up she's got going on, and it's quite interesting actually. Like Dazzler being sort of like reimagined as a punk, I guess, is what they're going for. Again, writer, we've got Magdalene Visaggio, artist Laura Braga, and Elizabeth Tork as the cover artist. So I'm guessing, yeah. I mean, I might end up picking that one up, you know, just to see. And that is it for this kind of bumper edition of Ace Comicals, because it's going to be a long one. So I'm going to sign off. So that has been Ace Comicals number 36. You can find us at www.acecomicals.com, which is kind of the hub for everything, as we've mentioned before. You can find us on Facebook under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Twitter under Ace Comicals. And you can interact with us on Twitter. You can send us a DM. If you've got a question for us, you can send it to acecomicals.gmail.com. acecomicals@gmail.com. Or you can DM us to our Twitter account, or you can send us a message on Facebook. You can get in touch with me on Twitter, which is @Batto, that's @BATTOU. We encourage you to join the conversation. Leave us some comments, leave us a review, tell us what you think of the show. Get involved, send us some replies, things like that. Tell us what you think about the books we read. You can find us to listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Castro. Leon, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Leon Everett.
That has been Ace Comicals number 36. So Ace Comicals, over and out.